Ladies and gentlemen, right now we're going to get into our next presenter. She is a consultant, entrepreneur, lecturer, and she has 6 years experience as a corporate trainer and HR generalist and over 7 years experience in banking. Ladies and gentlemen, put your virtual hands together, put your virtual clap icons together, and welcome. She says she resembles Oprah. Put your hands together and welcome Victoria Mullings.
Good morning, success advocates. It is certainly a pleasure to be with you for yet another Success Summit. And the title is so fitting this year. I just want to say to everyone in the room right now, grab a bunch of keys, keep it close to you. You're going to need it for the second part of this presentation. 15 years ago, I sat on an airplane next to a lady and her very energetic 3-year-old son named Manuel. As the plane began to taxi down the runway, she was wrapping up a phone call that she was on with her husband, and she turned the phone to her son and said to him, "Manuel, di adios a tu padre." And Manuel said, "Bye bye, Papa." It was so cute. Moments later, as the plane began to ascend into the air, Manuel became a bit restless. So Mom, trying to get him settled again, said to him, "No te preocupes, Manuel. Es una hermosa día, mi amor. Estamos pronto. Te quiero mucho, 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 mijo." And Manuel smiled up at Mom and said, "I love you too, Mama." My mind started going in that moment. I was saying to myself, what? She's speaking to him in Spanish, but he's answering her in English. That means he must understand both. So I became intrigued, and I was also a little bit embarrassed, and I will explain why. But I decided to strike up a conversation with his mother, and I said, this is amazing. Your son, he's fluent in Spanish and English. The intrigue was the psychologist in me, and the embarrassment was of someone trying desperately to learn Spanish at the time, failing epically, and in that moment being shown up by a 3-year-old. But I'm grateful to Manuel to this day because he was my inspiration to keep on trying all those years later, because I believed that if Manuel could do it, I could do it too. But his mom confirmed for me. She said, yes, his dad and I spoke both Spanish and English to him since he was a baby, and they pick it up so easily. He even speaks a little bit of Italian around his abuelita. And I said, meravigliosa. No, I didn't actually say that. I never really learned Italian. But what I did learn, success advocates, as she was fastening her seatbelt and he was watching her, he was trying to fasten his own seatbelt. And there it was, my aha moment. You see, at the time I was an undergrad taking classes in developmental and social psychology. My profs had done a great job of teaching this concept, but you know what they say, seeing is believing. And so I was seeing it unfold before my very eyes in real time. It turns out that our brains are hardwired to mimic what we hear and what we see. Now, many of you know this already, especially those of you that are parents, but during our developmental years, we are literally sponges. Mimicking is the first mode of learning that we develop from about 6 months of age. And this, success advocates, is the reason why the most impactful tool that any of us has for teaching is our own behavior. And the most innate type of leadership that exists is leadership by example. Because quite naturally, we learn our way in the world by modeling the behaviors of those around us. Now, when I found out that the theme for Success Summit 2020 was leadership beyond the crisis, I was excited. I live for the topic of leadership, and I've been teaching it all semester in every single class. Some of my students may be here today, and they can attest to this. Guys, you're going to get your final exam review in right now, okay? But we've all been impacted by COVID-19 in some way. Some might argue that at this moment, the crisis we are really experiencing is a crisis of leadership. Leadership at every level, in every organization, has been tested. What we need at this time is a certain type of leadership. And one of the questions that all of the leading minds in behavioral science and psychology, even the philosophers, have been trying to answer for well over 200 years is, are leaders born or are leaders made? There seems to be a lot of evidence that successful leaders have a certain, je ne sais quoi. Ah oui, je parle français, un petit peu. But I digress. Successful leaders have a common set of traits that are stable across their entire lifetime. At the same time, however, there is also evidence to suggest that leadership emerges based on a number of situational factors. Now, to be honest with you, my students and I never settled the debate of, whether leaders are born or they're made. And I don't think anyone will settle that debate anytime soon. But I've certainly adjusted my personal perspective on leadership due to COVID-19, because what we have seen is that the power of the situation exerts an enormous amount of influence over how leadership is allowed to express itself. Now, generally speaking, there are three main types of leadership. There's autocratic leadership, which is do as I say leadership. There's transactional leadership, which is task-focused leadership. This is the kind of leadership that you mostly get from managers. And then you have the type of leadership that is vision-focused and people-focused. It's called inspirational leadership. Some people also refer to inspirational leaders as transformational leaders, because that is what they do. They transform people. They're not perfect by any means, and they're not even always the easiest people to get along with, but they share a clear vision and show others through their actions how to get to the end goal. In other words, they lead by example. So at this time, I'm going to share a few examples of inspirational leaders with you, some that you may know and a few that you may not. Starting with the late, great Dr. Miles Monroe. He was undoubtedly an inspirational leader. Mahatma Gandhi was an inspirational leader. Steve Jobs was an inspirational leader. Ya Asantewa, Queen warrior mother of the Ashanti tribe, who herself fought on the front lines to retain her people's most prized possession, the golden stool, the literal seat of power. She was an inspirational leader. And Thomas Sankara, president of Burkina Faso from 1983 to 1987, he too was an inspirational leader. And so inspirational to me was Thomas Sankara that I'm about to share just an abbreviated list of what he was able to accomplish in just 4 years. He vaccinated over 2.5 million children against meningitis, yellow fever, and measles in just a few weeks. He initiated a nationwide literacy campaign, increasing the literacy rate from 13% in 1983 to 73% in 1987. He planted over 10 million trees to prevent deforestation. He built roads and railways, tying the nation together without the use of foreign aid. He outlawed female genital mutilation, forced marriages, and polygamy in support of women's rights. He redistributed land from feudal landlords and gave it directly to the peasants. As a result, wheat production rose in 3 years from 1,700 kilograms per hectare to 3,800 kilograms per hectare. And this made the country food sufficient. He forced civil servants to take a pay cut and to pay 1 month's salary for public projects. He sold the government's fleet of Mercedes-Benz cars and replaced them with the Renault 5, which was the cheapest car in the country at the time. His preferred mode of transportation was a bicycle. He lowered his own salary to $450 a month and limited his personal possessions to 1 car, 4 bikes, 3 guitars, 1 fridge, and 1 freezer. He did all of that, and he even managed to write the country's national. Wow. Talk about an overachiever, right? And folks, that's not nearly all that he accomplished. But how did he do it? He didn't ask any of his subordinates or any of his citizens to do what he himself was not prepared to do. And he was prepared to make personal sacrifices for the sake of the greater good. Simply put, success advocates, he led by example. Now, leading by example is sometimes a revolutionary act in and of itself because it takes courage to go against the status quo. And when that happens, inevitably there will be people that feel threatened. Sometimes they threaten your leadership, and sometimes they threaten your very life. So, as a leader, you must decide and you must know what need are you fulfilling. Some of us are attracted to leadership because we have a need for power. Others have a need for affiliation, and others still a need for achievement. But when you lead by example, you must be driven by more than those needs. Your behavior must come from your principles, and you must believe that you are making a necessary difference in the lives of others. The style of leadership we are most accustomed to in the Bahamas. I can't speak for anyone else around the world, but I can definitely speak for the Bahamas. We are accustomed to do as I say leadership, autocratic leadership, or do as I say leadership. It's non-consultative, right? This is partly why we're in the crisis that we are in and have been in even before COVID-19. Because Generation Y, the millennials, the persons in the mid-30s to their mid-20s, and Generation Z, that's the generation that follows the millennials in their early 20s to their early teens, they do not respond well to do as I say leadership. They may follow the autocratic leader, but not enthusiastically, and they certainly do not respect the leader that says one thing but does another. No, the Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok generations, which are comprising larger and larger portions of the workplace with the influence of technology, for better or for worse, have gone back to the basics of following what they see. So, leaders in today's climate have to make a decision. They have to decide what they value most when it comes to their followers. Do they want obedience without question, or do they want growth and empowerment? Answering the question will determine what your legacy as a leader will be. Now, I'd like to take the rest of the time I have to share with you 7 key points that I believe will help you to become an inspirational leader, or an even greater inspirational leader if you already are. Are you ready? Seize the day. Opportunities are all around us, even in a crisis, especially in a crisis. COVID-19 has provided many opportunities for leaders to emerge. And so, if you are still sitting on the sidelines, I want to encourage you today to get in the game. If there's a business idea you have that you think will work in this environment, and as we transition into the new normal, start the business. If there's an idea you had for a book that you've been sitting on, write that book. If you have been contemplating a career change and like everyone else have been caught off guard by downsizing due to COVID-19, now is not the time to sit around and say, what am I going to do? No, now is the time to prepare yourself, update your skills. Leadership is about action. It's about what we do. So get ready, fire, and then aim. I'm going to say that again. Get ready, fire, and then aim. And I put it in that specific order because a lot of times we spend so much time trying to perfect a course of action before we take the first step. A leader understands that timing is everything. And you can refine what you do as you go along. But the most important thing is to begin. Key point number 2. Stop waiting for permission. Seriously, stop waiting for permission. Or in other words, stop relying on others to validate your leadership abilities. You have to believe in yourself and in your own abilities as a leader. If you wait on people to give you the go ahead, you will literally be waiting your entire life. And sometimes when people realize that you need their validation, that's the one thing they would never give you. And they will even try to use it against you to manipulate you. So you have to find ways to validate yourself. Trust me, I have been here many times asking myself the question, are people even going to want to hear what I have to say? Will they care about my key points? Have I accomplished enough? Enough. The time is now. Give yourself permission to be great, and don't be intimidated by others in leadership, because all of us have something unique and something different to bring to the table. And that brings us to key point number 3. Use your superpower. Now, in order to use your superpower, you have to know your superpower. In leadership, there are 5 types of power that you can leverage. And oftentimes people use more than one. But those types of power are: 1, legitimate power. And this is leadership by Title A. My name is on the desk, so you have to listen to me. There's coercive power, which is leadership by threats. I think we all know what that one is about. There is reward power, which, as it says, hinges on the leader's ability to give rewards, to have repetitive behavior continue. And then there is leadership on the basis of knowledge, which is expert power. And sometimes these are the people who think they have the biggest brain in the room, right? A lot of times these are the people that are on the ego trip, but they get it done as well. And finally, you have referent power. And this is the type of power that goes hand in hand with inspirational leadership. Leaders that have referent power are respected and admired. They cultivate relationships, and their followers aspire to be like them. This is the type of power that we need to see a lot more of in organizations right now. Now, you may ask yourself, how do I develop referent power? Well, that brings us to key point number 4. Be authentic. You can't be anybody else because everybody else is already taken. And when you're authentic as a leader, people will trust you. Even when you're not giving them the best news, they will trust that you're the kind of leader that will do what it takes to get it done. A lot of times, we try to put on this facade or this image that is totally different from who we actually are. And when you do that, all you're going to do is create an uncomfortable, tiny box for yourself to live in. Trust me. As a leader who leads by example, you have to carefully design your personal brand. One thing about branding is it has to be consistent. You have to present the same image over and over. So I'll quickly share with you the last key point. Key point number 5, communicate often and communicate effectively. Key point number 6, prioritize people. Key point number 7, be consistent. Those are the 7 key points to inspirational leadership. Now, in closing, I will share with you a short story about employee empowerment. There once was a boss lady who to her employees would say, "I don't pay you to think, just do as I say." Yet, still her employees for her customers cared, but all their suggestions would fall on deaf ears. So one day, her best employee got down on one knee and begged the boss lady for a set of spare keys to close and open up early and complete all of his checks, which should have included health and safety specs. Boss lady denied. She was set in her ways. She left out from work one evening, not knowing she had left a gas stove ablaze. When she returned the next morning, she found that her business establishment had burned to the ground. She cried, she wailed, and she said why she tore up her britches. Asked her best employee, why did you not think to turn off those switches? And with the straightest of faces, didn't even blink, he said, "Boss lady, I did only what you said. Remember, you didn't pay me the thing. Thank you very much, guys, for attending. The moderator.
What happiness is you